Hello, thanks for watching. I am growing, I would say increasingly concerned about a potential blizzard event here this weekend across the Sierra Nevadas. The reason for that is something of a pattern change. We've been watching it over the last 5 days. A lot of the events that we've talked about, this year, I think for California, certainly since it feels like maybe January of 2024 and onward, we've had these subtropical Pacific jet extensions or atmospheric river events. And often when we look down at a jet stream level wind map like this one, we've seen these events in the atmospheric rivers coming out of Hawaii, maybe pointed at San Diego, where we saw flooding at times this year, or pointed at Santa Barbara or Ventura County, where unfortunately we saw flooding as well, or the Bay Area, where we saw flooding in some of the streets. We've seen a lot of rainfall for California, but despite that, we've seen snow in the Sierra Nevadas, but technically we're still below average year to date. Now, part of that is because we started the year so slow, but we haven't seen these kind of massive snowfall events like we saw maybe last year in March. Well, that's going to change here this weekend. The polar jet is re-entering the picture, much like it dominated in March of last year. That's going to lower the snow levels. And when I say lower, I mean lower in elevation, not lower how much snow is falling. A lot more snow is going to fall as a result of this event here. But it's this polar branch, this more northward branch of the jet stream here. You can see it here in this trough entering the picture that's going to dominate. So let's take a closer look at some of the impacts here. We're looking down at the National Weather Service advisories active here on Wednesday afternoon. I think if you just look at all the colors on this map, it kind of forebodes that something is coming, certainly this weekend here. The orange color, at least to my eyes, jumps off the screen. That is the blizzard warning that we're concerned about for the central and northern Sierras. The Sierra Nevadas, they get a lot of snow. They got so much snow through history, right? The glaciers carved out Yosemite, Hetch Hetchy, Kings Canyon, etc. But they get a lot of snow. Certainly in an active year like this, they get a lot of snow. But blizzard warnings are still fairly rare for the Sierra Nevadas despite that. Our last one was all the way last year at about this time in March. And kind of fittingly, we have a similar event here to watch. In fact, this event coming this weekend, at least as forecast indicates now, could be stronger than what we saw last March, maybe even on par or stronger than what we saw at the end of 2022 in December, and really maybe one of the more stronger snow events for specifically the Central Sierras of really, you could argue, the 21st century. The impacts should be significant. Travel extremely discouraged in the Sierras. We'll break down all those impacts here in just a second. Some other things of note on this map are these beige colors. Those are wind advisories and wind warnings. You can imagine blizzards. A component of that is the wind, so some of these other areas seeing strong winds as well. The pink color here are winter storm warnings active for the Cascades. That's another component of this polar jet stream. It tends to bring more snowfall to the Cascades, parts of the northern Rockies. We're seeing winter storm warnings for areas there, the northern Cascades, the northern Rockies, and the Idaho mountains as well. This is an area that we've talked about this year. We'll take a look at it in a sec, that needs more snowfall in terms of that year-to-date average for that snowpack going into the summer, which could be warmer at times. So part of this, I think, is good news. We have to measure that with the fact that we're looking at life-threatening conditions in the Sierra Nevadas. If we look down at the visible satellite imagery, this valid here as of Wednesday afternoon at the recording of this video, seeing clouds now overspreading Washington, Oregon. If we take a look at the radar presentation, seeing now some moderate to heavy rain pushing into parts of western Washington. We actually have a flood watch active here in western Washington. Rainfall observations being reported here in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. And what looks like rain here on this radar imagery, there's no distinction between rain and snow. There's very likely heavy snowfall now getting into parts of the Cascades. We just looked at those winter storm warnings there, so that checks out. If we jump over here, this is an ECMWF forecast. This is those same jet stream level winds we just looked at to start the video. But I want to play this forecast out into the future to see where those are going to be focusing on. Often, when these troughs move in, where those jet stream level winds are strongest and where they're coming on shore is where we can expect some of the biggest impacts as a result. And as I take this forecast into Thursday, really kind of midday tomorrow, what we were looking at just now was more of the impacts, some rain, some snow from the northwest, Washington, parts of northern Oregon, the Willamette Valley. That's going to be shifting south as we get into the weekend. So now tomorrow on Thursday, looking more at southern Oregon, the Willamette Valley, expecting heavy rainfall tomorrow, heavy rainfall in the southern Cascades, and now the impacts starting to creep into northern California and the Klamath Mountains as well. So I take this forecast now into Friday. We can see this shifting again further south. It's not uncommon for these events. They start in the northwest to move southeast through time, so the event's kind of shifting south along the west coast as a result. And the jet stream here is getting stronger. I don't know if you noticed that, but as I take this back and then play this forward through the forecast here, the jet stream level winds getting stronger as they come on shore, and ultimately now this forecast on the day Saturday here with the heaviest kind of onshore flow over California. So we're really expecting these blizzard conditions to start really Friday night, getting perhaps very heavy or very potent and extreme Saturday morning, and then into the day Saturday as well, which is March 1st into March 2nd, March 2nd being Saturday here for California. Eventually, this trough starting to exit the region, the influence waning as we go into early next week, Monday and Tuesday, with some lingering showers and snow chances as well. To get a closer look at the impacts here and the timing, this is the ECMWF forecast for precipitation and the type here. I'll make this valid as a Wednesday evening. You can see the precipitation forecast right here for Wednesday evening lining up with what we just looked at on that radar presentation. So the rain in western Washington, snowfall in the Cascades, rain starting to get into the Willamette Valley. As I take this into Thursday, we can see that heavy snow in the southern Cascades. Remember that jet stream pushing more over Oregon at this time as we go through the day Thursday. As I take the forecast into Friday now, again, more of the impact shifting further south over northern California. We have snowfall starting to get into the central Sierras here as we go into the day Friday, with some light rain now expected across California on Friday as well. But if I take you into very early Saturday, it's perhaps when we're going to see the most extreme life-threatening conditions Friday night and early Saturday for the central Sierra Nevadas. Blizzard warnings active for just that reason, and then rainfall expected across some areas of California, maybe even getting as far south as San Diego or Los Angeles as we go through the day Saturday. Some heavier rain at times for the Bay Area and coastal California, and then rain getting into the Central Valley as well. The rainfall, at least for California, not going to be as potent as some of the events we saw earlier. This isn't your kind of quintessential atmospheric river event. Those tend to bring heavier rainfall events, maybe for the lower elevations of California. We are expecting maybe an inch plus, maybe 2 inches of rainfall in some of the coastal regions of California, but not expecting, heightened flooding risks out of this by any means. The Central Valley likely to see some measurable rainfall as well. Maybe as you get closer, to the foothills, given that onshore flow that we talked about, could see some higher levels, maybe in kind of the Fresno foothill area, and some of the areas of the Sacramento Valley, where instead of maybe a 1/4 inch, expecting 1/2 inch or more in some of those locations. If we look at precipitation totals valid as of Sunday morning, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Not nearly as much rain for California as we've seen with previous events. And then, of course, these very high precipitation amounts in the Sierra Nevadas will fall as snow, just kind of indicative of how much snow we're expecting there. Where we are expecting some heavy rain is in northern California, northern coastal California, coastal Oregon, potentially 2 inches total in the Willamette Valley, with lesser amounts as you get east of the Cascades and the Sierra, with perhaps some light rain with some snow mixed in eastern Washington and the Snake River Valley, where flakes are expected to fall, but not really expecting too much snow accumulation if you're looking for that. If we do look at those snowfall accumulations valid, I'll make this valid as a Monday morning, March 1st. This total snow accumulations from now out till Monday from the National Blended Models, or the NBM for short, combines a number of different models here. We actually can't really see the totals on the Sierra Nevadas. I'll show you a different graphic in a moment. It tops out at 4 feet of snowfall. We're going well above that in many of these locations here across the Sierra Nevadas. Expecting over 1 foot to 2 feet plus in parts of the Cascades and the Klamath Mountains. There are areas here in the northern Cascades and the northern Rockies that need the snowfall. So I think that's good news for them. This is kind of one of these big polar jet troughs that can bring a lot of snowfall to the Cascades and the northern Rockies, and we're seeing that in the forecast as well. It's kind of a different way to visualize the precipitation, I think, coming through this weekend. This is the ECMWF, the 5-day precipitation anomalies, really kind of valid through Monday, March 4th. You can see very heavy precip and snowfall expected in the Sierra Nevadas. Nothing, too extreme here in California. We're really expecting the heaviest totals is in northwest California and more western Oregon in terms of that rainfall. And then some above average areas here east of that, but again, nothing too extreme as we get into the Intermountain West. National Weather Service out of Sacramento put this graphic out. I like this because it helps us to visualize these snowfall totals all the way up the crest of the Sierra Nevadas. And really kind of the big story here is we're expecting feet and feet and feet of snowfall at the crest of the Sierra Nevadas, and relatively low snow levels as well, down to about 2,000 feet, with 1 to 5 inches here reported in Colfax along I-80 here. You get up into Donner Pass, Kingvale area, this area, not out of the question that we might be talking upwards of 10 feet of snowfall. Tremendous amount of snow expected on I-80. This is why we're thinking more of a historic type of event for the Central Sierras as we go through the weekend here. I think a component of this that's just going to kind of add to the misery, add to the level of danger for the Sierra Nevadas is going to be the wind. That's really what helps to make it a blizzard warning. And very heavy wind, or I should say strong wind gusts expected for the Central Sierras at times this weekend, maybe the most potent Friday into early Saturday, where some of these wind gust totals are maxes here through the weekend, talking 50 to 60 mile an hour winds with 2 to 4 inches per hour of snowfall, cold temperatures overnight. You kind of overlap these ingredients. I mean, this is not something that you're going to survive in very long. And if you're outside, we're talking the potential of, if you want to go for a 10-minute walk, you're putting yourself in peril at times in conditions like that. So travel, needless to say, heavily discouraged in the Central Sierras. I would even say going outside for a prolonged period of time would be discouraged. Things like having access to a secondary source of power, water, food, a way to heat yourself. All these things are going to be very important if you're going to be attempting to ride out the storm, which I hope you're not attempting to do in the Central Sierras. Some other wind gusts of note across the western region and eastern Oregon, wind advisories and wind warnings active there. Lesser amounts when you get into some of these valleys, however, where a lot of the population centers are. Of a map, this is a map we've looked at this year. Part of the story, especially for the Cascades and the Northern Rockies, is we are getting quite a bit of snowfall to some areas that need it, frankly. The Northern Rockies are running well below average here, as we're getting kind of in to the end of the stretch where we'd expect, meaningful snowfall. So this kind of late snowfall event, I think, is good news. I'm seeing something of another system trying to get in next week, but it doesn't look like it's going to focus too much on the Northern Cascades and the Northern Rockies. So good that we're delivering on that area here. The Cascades were about average. Right now we're going to go well above that as a result of all the snow we're going to get this weekend and really over the next 48 hours. Sierra Nevada's at about 84%, 86% in the Central Sierras, closer to 80% in the Southern Sierras. Looking at some of those averages, the year-to-date totals, we're going to be at average after this event. I mean, it would take a pretty substantial forecast error to not reach the average in a lot of these locations. We'll get the update. We'll look at this map as we go through next week. But even if you just jump over and look at the Central Sierra Snow Lab near Donner Pass, they are so close to the average anyway at this point here in late February that it would take a miracle, not a miracle March, because that's going to bump up so well over, but it'd take a miracle for them not to reach their average, I think, after all is said and done through the weekend. So good news in one sense, double-edged sword, of course, but good news that given our late start in the Sierra Nevadas, we kind of turned the hose back on in January, that we've caught up as quickly as we have in the Sierras for going into another summer, another growing season. Another component of this, maybe of lesser note, but certainly a concern for agriculture and blossom across the Central Valley, are temperatures. With the polar extension, or I should say the polar trough moving in, that tends to bring that colder air down from the northwest out of Alaska associated with that. And so we're expecting colder temperatures. This is looking at the ECMWF forecast of 7-day temperature anomalies. And kind of the short story here is where we see these cold contours on the color bar. We're expecting cooler temperatures, so below freezing parts of the Willamette Valley as we go into early next week. Not necessarily expecting that early next week into the Central Valley. The forecast right now, given some of the cloud cover that we're expecting in this area, our temperatures are going to remain above that freezing threshold, maybe even frost as well. But if I take the forecast a little bit further out into the end of the week, we have another system that we might be dealing with midweek, maybe Wednesday. But after that, we might be dealing with some more cold temperatures and frost and freeze risk associated with that. And the kind of caveat or the disclaimer that I'll give for that is frost and freeze risk, it's hard to forecast. It's one kind of number that we're focused on, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It can be hard to forecast frost. I'll be honest, 12 to 24 hours out, right? Because it's that one number. It has a lot to do with wind and cloud cover, and it's even harder to forecast out 5, 7, 8 days plus. So the risk is heightened for frost and freeze over the Central Valley over the next 7 days plus, but we can't say anything maybe more confident than that, at least at this time. If we take a look at the ECMWF ensemble forecast for the jet stream, that same jet stream we were talking about, to start the video, I'm taking this way out. I'm fast forwarding way out to the midweek next week, so March 6th on Wednesday. I mentioned the possibility of a system trying to get back into the area, at least for California, maybe Southern Oregon. And the reason for that is we're seeing an upper level ridge build into the North Pacific on this forecast here. That's dipping down into a trough across California. You can kind of make out that dip in the jet stream, and that could try to bring some rainfall into this area here, maybe additional snowfall over the central Sierras. At least right now in this forecast, not looking as potent as what we're going to be dealing with, immediately this next weekend, or maybe some of the other systems that we've seen this week. But given that this is the polar jet stream, we're expecting cold air behind this trough. That's my concern as we get into late next week for those colder temperatures, for that frost and freeze risk. If we jump over and look at the GFS over the same time period a little bit differently, but they still have that upper level ridge further to the west, dipping down into a trough across California, cold air, and then behind this, again, looking out at March 6th of next week on Wednesday. So seeing some agreement there, right, in the ensembles, both the GFS, the American model, and the European model, leads me to believe that we have a heightened chance for another system, precipitation, trying to get through California, maybe southern Oregon, as we go through the work week next week, and potentially some cold air behind it. If we look at the GFS ensemble precipitation anomalies for the next work week, we can kind of see that highlighted area: Northern California, perhaps the Sierra Nevadas, Central California for some precip, and Southern Oregon for increased rainfall next week. Likely looking more like a quick hitting system moving through Wednesday, or roughly around the midweek time period. If we look at the Climate Prediction Center, their forecast for temperatures for March 5th through March 9th, so really kind of that same time period getting into the next work week. Colder temperatures expected for California. Again, going into why I was a little bit worried about that frost and freeze risk for the Central Valley. If you look at the precipitation over that same time period, that above average precipitation chance really kind of highlighted over Central California, maybe Southern Oregon as well, and Southern California included in that. And again, with a broader kind of risk across the west, just given that trough there and some colder air coming in behind it. If we look at the ECMWF ensemble temperatures, this is for a 5-day period starting next work week. So looking out all the way through next work week, and kind of the big picture here, it's cold. It's going to be cold across the western region next week behind this upper level trough. And again, an area that we're concerned about for frost and freeze would be the Central Valley associated with that. So I think that covers just about everything here today. We'll talk again next week. Stay safe. If you have any travel plans across the Central Sierras over the next 4 to 5 days, maybe don't. That would be my strong recommendation. Keep that area clear for first responders who might be dealing with folks up there. So that's all. Thank you for watching.